Don't go!
Have you ever heard of a woman who had to give birth to twins, alone, on the side of the road, in the middle of a storm, because her billionaire husband threw her out after flaunting his mistress? She knelt in the mud begging for mercy, and all she got was a splash of dirt from his speeding car. But here's the truth no one knew. That moment, the moment she was covered in mud, was the moment she was reborn. Zuri N'Dela turned humiliation into strength, and the mud that once stained her became the soil she rose from. She had no power, no money, only her hands, and 2 newborns who depended on her. 5 years later, she founded Mud and Bloom, a small workshop where broken women could rebuild their lives stitch by stitch. Her story isn't about revenge, it's about resurrection, because you can be thrown into the dirt and still bloom. She didn't just reclaim her name, she helped others rise again, 1 year, 1 stitch, 1 dream at a time. And when she finally stood face to face with the man who destroyed her, she said just 1 line that silenced the entire room. That night, I gave birth in the mud, and the man who splashed it on me is sitting right here. If you've ever been betrayed, broken, or left behind, don't scroll past this story, because maybe this is the one that makes you believe in yourself again. The luxury car tore down the flooded avenue, its headlights slicing through the downpour like blades. Its wheels surged over a rising gutter, sending a wave of filthy water across the sidewalk. The splash hit her full force, chest, face, legs, drenching the white cotton of her maternity dress in a single brutal strike. She didn't move. She didn't even flinch. She just knelt there in the rain, arms wrapped around her stomach, lips parted in silent pain. Lightning split the sky behind her, a sharp white flash that made the whole world blink. For a moment, it looked like she was glowing, but it was only the mud. Zuri N'Dela was 8 months pregnant, with twins, and alone. Behind her, the grand wrought iron gate of the Adebayo estate stood shut, rain clattering on its gold-plated finish like fingers tapping a coffin lid. Somewhere beyond that gate was warmth, chandeliers, marble floors, velvet chairs. But the house had never felt colder than it did tonight. The man who lived in it, the man who had once whispered dreams into her belly, had looked her in the eye and said, "I don't want those bastards in my house. Not our children, not my sons, just those bastards." The words still rang in her ears, louder than the storm. She had stood barefoot on the marble floor, staring at him. Her hands had trembled, not from fear, from the effort of staying upright, of not falling apart. She had whispered his name once, Kwame. But his back was already turned. He picked up his jacket, slipped on his watch, smoothed down the collar. His reflection in the gilded mirror was perfect. A man polished for cameras, for investors, for applause. Not a single crack, not a single care. He'd opened the door and gestured outward like a maître d', showing an unwanted guest to the street. She had stepped out, into the rain, into the dark. The gate groaned as it shut behind her. Now, kneeling on the street, the cold gripped her bones. Her fingers dug into the dirt for balance. She gasped. The pain was sharp and sudden, a twist in her belly. Her breath caught. Not now. Not here. She pressed both hands over her stomach, whispering, "Shh, babies, not yet." A car horn blared nearby. She flinched. Her body leaned against the wet brick wall of a shop closed for the night. Her hair clung to her face. Her dress, once elegant, clung to her legs like rags. She couldn't tell what was rain and what was tears anymore. Then, headlights again. A silver sedan this time, slower, familiar. Her heart surged. She struggled to her feet, one hand on her belly, the other raised halfway in hope. The car rolled toward her, wipers slashing side to side. Then it stopped, right in front of her. The passenger window lowered. Zuri's lips parted, ready to speak his name. But it wasn't Kwame in the passenger seat. It was her, Amahle Maseko. The woman the press called the new flame of Luzira's most eligible tycoon. She was elegant in an icy way, Perfect cheekbones, glossy lips, hair pinned like royalty. Even in the dark, even behind glass, she radiated detachment. Her eyes swept over Zuri like a queen regarding a beggar, and then she smiled. Just slightly, just enough to say, "I won." Amali tilted her chin. Her voice, when it came, was smooth as oil. "He doesn't want you anymore." The window rolled back up. Kwame never even looked. The car revved and surged forward. The tires sliced through a puddle and through another wave of dirty water into the night, catching Zuri full in the chest. She staggered back. Her feet slipped in the mud. She fell hard onto her knees. Pain shot through her spine. Her breath came in short, shallow bursts. And then another contraction gripped her, this one stronger. She cried out. The sound vanished in the storm. She crouched, hands shaking, nails scraping the wet sidewalk, teeth clenched. And then she laughed, just once, a sharp, bitter sound. Her face turned up to the sky, raindrops striking her cheeks like needles. "I'll survive this," she whispered. "I'll survive you, I'll survive them, and these babies." Her hand clenched her belly. "They'll see the sun. They'll know love." The street around her was empty. Just shadows, just rain, just pain. Her eyes fluttered shut. She didn't see the pair of headlights slowly rounding the corner. A dented pickup truck rumbled down the hill, its driver squinting through the storm. The windshield wipers were barely keeping up. Inside, Malik Okoro cursed softly under his breath. His shift had run long. He was late to the depot. Again. He was supposed to take another shipment north by morning. He turned the radio down, rubbed his eyes, adjusted the rearview mirror. Then he saw her. A woman collapsed in the mud, belly swollen, hands clutching her sides. He hit the brakes. The truck screeched, tires skidding on slick asphalt, the back fishtailed slightly. He brought it under control, heart pounding. "No, no, no," he muttered. "Not tonight, not this mess." He reached for the gear stick. Paused. Looked again. She was barely moving. Something in him twisted. He put the truck in reverse, backed up, got out. The rain hit him like slaps. He jogged over, boots splashing. Hey, miss, you okay?" No response, just a groan. Then, a small, sharp cry, not from her, from beneath her shawl. His heart stopped. Wait, no way. He pulled the fabric aside. A newborn, tiny, slimy, eyes shut tight, crying. Oh, God. Then another, a second baby. This one silent, barely breathing. Oh, no, 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 no. He acted fast. He grabbed a tarp from the truck bed, swaddled them best he could, lifted her gently, arms strong from years of hauling. Her head lolled against his shoulder. One baby cried. The other barely stirred. He laid her on the passenger seat, turned the heater on full blast, floored the gas. The truck peeled away, taillights disappearing into the rain. In the back seat, two infants trembled against each other, one already learning how to fight, the other already learning how to endure. The storm raged on, but somewhere far off, the clouds were thinning. A heartbeat, faint but steady. A woman's breath, labored but alive. A siren in the distance, hope wearing the voice of emergency. The city of Luzira never slept, but that night it bore witness to something most never would. Mud on silk, blood on concrete, and a vow, spoken not in words, but in the way a mother curls herself around her children. The vow that from this night forward, she would never kneel again, only rise. And from somewhere deeper than flesh, deeper than pain, something began to bloom. A seed, a defiance, the start of something no storm could drown. In the fogged glass of the truck window, a single reflection lingered, mud-streaked, tear-wet, but still standing, still burning, still here. And far behind them, on a hill lined with golden gates, a mansion slept soundly, its master unaware that the mud he had tried to wash away would one day wear a crown. The scream didn't rise. It split, low and raw, buried in her throat like a dying animal. Zuri's fingers clawed at the dashboard, the pain in her spine buckling her forward as another contraction tore through her. The truck lurched over a pothole. Water slapped against the windows. A flash of lightning lit the interior white for a moment. Her face glistened. Her lips trembled. Her knees pressed together, desperate against time. From the back seat came a different sound, high, sharp, rattling the air, the cry of a newborn, fragile, but fierce, alive. Malik Okoro gripped the steering wheel harder, his knuckles pale. Rain hammered the windshield like gunfire, wipers thrashing side to side, barely holding back the blur. His eyes flicked between the road and the rearview mirror, between the woman bleeding beside him and the tiny bundle behind him that wouldn't stop screaming. Then silence. He turned his head. One was still. Malik's pulse skipped. He reached behind, fingers fumbling for the second swaddle of cloth. The baby was too quiet. He brought the bundle forward, placed it on Zuri's lap. "I need you to hold him," he said, voice tense, low. "He needs your warmth." Zuri didn't answer. Her head was tilted back, jaw clenched. She looked somewhere beyond the roof of the truck, somewhere past pain. Another jolt, her eyes snapped open. "They're coming," she whispered, "both of them." "Hold on, we're almost there." The clinic rose ahead in the rain, a dim rectangle of light beneath a flickering sign that buzzed in and out like a broken promise. Malik honked once, twice. He didn't wait for permission. He braked hard, shoved the gear into park, flung the door open. A nurse inside heard the slam and rushed out, raincoat flapping behind her. She didn't ask questions, just grabbed the nearest stretcher and helped lift Zuri, the bundle, the blood, the mud, all of it, into the clinic. Zuri faded into the overhead lights, cold and buzzing. A figure leaned over her, a woman in a green scrub cap, dark eyes, quick hands, soft voice but firm. "I'm Dr. Layla Tembo. You're safe now. Do not push. Breathe with me." Zuri couldn't speak, but she nodded once. A hand squeezed hers. Malik, still there, still holding on. And then the world exploded. Pain like knives from within, the flood, the pressure, the rupture. Her body opened like a cracked dam. The scream came this time, hoarse, full-throated, stolen from her soul. The nurse counted. The doctor moved fast. Another scream, but not hers. The second baby had arrived. A girl. Healthy. Crying. Alive. They wrapped the girl quickly, handed her off. But the boy. He was pale, small. His breath was shallow, more a flutter than a gasp. Dr. Tembo hunched over him, fingers moving across his chest. "Come on," she muttered. "Come on, little one. Don't you dare." Zuri heard none of it. The light above her flickered again, shadows swirled, and then black. She woke to silence. Her throat was dry, her limbs heavy. The ceiling was yellow, stained, but not moving, not raining, not cold. She turned her head. A plastic bassinet sat beside her. Two bundles, one stirred, one still. Her breath caught. She reached out, hand trembling. The still one moved, just slightly, a tiny breath. Zuri broke. She didn't sob. She shattered. Silent tears poured sideways into the pillow. She whispered something only she could hear. Then she sat up, pain stiff in every joint. The door opened softly. Malik entered. His clothes had changed, cleaner now, his eyes weary but kind. He carried a paper bag. "Warm broth," he said, "and clothes. I didn't know your size, so—" She looked at him. Not just at him, through him. "What's their names?" he asked quietly. Zuri's fingers touched each child, one after the other. She spoke gently. "This is Nia. She kicked first. She cries loud. She'll survive anything." Her hand moved to the other. "This is Cairo. He came quiet, but he's strong. He just hides it." Malik sat beside her, said nothing for a long while. Then he handed her an envelope. She opened it. Inside, 2 documents, a printed hospital intake form, her name scribbled in pain-warped handwriting, and a second sheet, ambulance billing signed by Malik. "Dr. Tembo gave me copies," he said. "In case." She said, "One day this might matter." Zuri looked down at the sheets, her name, her blood type, her time of arrival, 3:47 a.m., rainy night, no next of kin. A strange sense washed over her, not grief, not fear, something colder, more awake. "They'll spin it," she said suddenly. "He'll tell the world I ran, that I left him, that I lied." He might, Malik said. He will. Zuri looked at her babies, then at the paper. Then this stays with me. The nurse returned, carrying 2 folded blankets. She glanced between the 2 of them. Press outside, she said gently. They're asking questions already. Zuri's body tensed. How did they know I was here? They didn't, the nurse said. But someone wants the story first. Zuri nodded. I need to leave today. You can't move. I will. Dr. Tembo entered, wiping her hands. She looked from Zuri to Malik, then to the babies. Do you want them to survive? Zuri nodded. Then rest tonight. We discharge you tomorrow, quietly. I'll write a new address for the record. Zuri blinked. You'd do that? The doctor folded her arms. I've seen men like him. I've seen women left to bleed while their names are dragged through sewage. Not this time. Zuri's mouth quivered. Not with weakness, with the struggle of receiving grace. The next morning, she dressed in clothes too big, held her children close, and stepped into the rising light. The sky had cleared, but the streets were still slick with memory. Malik's truck waited by the curb. The engine rumbled low, a sleeping lion. He opened the passenger door. I know a place, he said. Few hours out, quiet, clean. Zuri didn't answer. She stepped in, laid the babies between them. The road unwound ahead. Behind, Luzira faded into the morning haze. Neither of them spoke for a long while. Then Zuri said, Why did you come back? Malik glanced at her. I wasn't going to, he said. I had the truck in reverse. Then the boy made a sound, just a little one, but it was enough. Zuri nodded, her eyes fixed forward. You saved our lives. No, he said, he did. She looked down at Cairo, the quiet one, the still one, the one who breathed just once and changed everything. The horizon stretched open. Ahead, the land rose. Trees swayed. Wind moved like a whisper. Zuri exhaled, not in relief, in readiness, because whatever lay ahead, it would not be silence. It would not be surrender. She held her children tighter, and somewhere deep inside her, the mud that once marked her shame was beginning to feel like ground, something she could stand on, something she could build on, something that could, in time, grow. The truck rolled on. The road curved, and far behind a city began to stir with lies. But here, in the hum of tires, the scent of milk, the heat of infant breath, truth slept peacefully and would soon wake. She opened her eyes to whispers. They say she ran off with the truck driver. No shame these days, 8 months pregnant and still climbing into strangers' vehicles. They found her in a clinic outside Luzira, blood on the floor, babies screaming, like something out of a tabloid. Zuri didn't move. She lay still beneath a scratchy blanket, eyes fixed on a water stain on the ceiling, shaped like a bird with broken wings. The voices came from beyond the curtain. Thin fabric couldn't hide sharp words. She ruined him, poor man. Now he's left explaining why his wife vanished with twins that might not even be his. A nurse entered. Her smile flickered when she realized Zuri was awake. How are you feeling? She asked, straightening the IV. Zuri didn't answer. The nurse lowered her voice. We've had reporters call. One even tried sneaking in dressed like a courier. Zuri blinked. The nurse hesitated. It's everywhere. Social feeds, headlines. They're calling you. She stopped. I can ask the doctor to sign your discharge now if you feel ready. Zuri turned her face away. The mirror across the room showed what she hadn't wanted to face yet. A woman in oversized clothes, with dark circles under her eyes and bony hands. Mud stained the hem of her dress. Her lips were chapped. Her neck bore faint bruises where stress had knotted her muscles into steel. She didn't look like someone who'd just survived birth. She looked like she'd survived war. She got up, slowly. Her body hurt in too many places to count. But pain was clean, honest, unlike lies. The front page of the newspaper waited in the hallway, folded neatly on the bench. Someone had left it there on purpose. The headline read, Real estate tycoon abandoned by wife, mystery man, illegitimate twins in shock scandal. Her name wasn't printed in full, just Z'd. But the photo, blurred, rain slick, catching her mid-scream on that rainy night, left no doubt. The caption beneath it dripped like venom. A distraught woman believed to be Zuri N'Dela, former wife of mogul Kwame Adebayo, seen fleeing into the night with unidentified man. No mention of labor, no mention of blood, no mention of twins born in the gutter. Only madness, infidelity, scandal. Malik stood near the exit, arms folded. He looked like a statue carved from stone and shadow. When she stepped toward him, his eyes softened. "You saw it?" she asked. He nodded. "Doesn't matter," he said. "It does," she replied. She stepped outside. The air smelled like old cigarettes and exhaust. A cat curled beneath the clinic sign blinked at her lazily. She followed Malik down the slope toward the truck. In the back seat, Nia slept in a bassinet fashioned from a basket and 2 pillows. Cairo lay beside her, eyes open but unfocused. Zuri climbed in. Her bones ached from more than childbirth. "You could leave," she said. "You don't owe us anything." Malik started the engine. Let it hum. His voice was quiet. "I used to drive for him years ago." She looked at him confused. "Adebayo Holdings," he said. "Back when the foundation first launched, I ran routes for their outreach programs, delivering school supplies, water tanks, that kind of thing." She blinked. "You worked for Kwame?" He nodded. "Until I saw numbers that didn't add up, missing inventory, shipments logged that never happened. I raised a question, just one, and suddenly my truck needed repairs and my contract was gone." She leaned back. The lie was older than she thought. They drove in silence for miles. The road twisted through scrubland and fields dotted with red clay and low trees. Somewhere in the distance, a river glittered in the sun like a torn ribbon. At a small compound tucked between hills, they stopped. A building with peeling white paint, a goat tied to a stump. A few children ran barefoot across the yard. An old woman with a faded scarf waved from the porch. "She's a friend," Malik said. "Won't ask questions." Zuri stepped out, one baby in each arm. The children stared wide-eyed. Inside, the air was warm, dry, smelled of maize and soap. A narrow cot, a cracked basin. No mirrors. Perfect. Over the next few days, Zuri moved like a ghost. She fed, cleaned, rocked, listened, but barely spoke. Her mind kept circling the same image, her face on that paper, frozen in anguish. Malik brought groceries, boiled water, changed diapers with awkward hands and serious eyes. He didn't speak of the past again, but one night he handed her a small manila folder. "What's this?" she asked. He hesitated. "Dr. Tembo gave me something else." Inside, a second set of medical documents, a full intake report, signatures, time-stamped scans, photos from the emergency room, her on the gurney, the twins in swaddles, the ID tag wrapped around her wrist, and stapled to the back, the ambulance receipt with Malik's name and vehicle number. "Proof," he said, "not just memory." Zuri sat down. The lamp overhead buzzed faintly. Her hands shook. "I thought you'd need it one day." She looked at him. Her voice cracked. "Why do you believe me?" Malik didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Because I saw the way you looked at them, and because I've seen what men like him do when no one's watching." The babies stirred. Cairo whimpered. Zuri rose. She cradled them both close. Her voice was barely above a breath. "I won't let this be the end of my story." He nodded once. Outside, crickets hummed. The night was deep and wide. The next morning, she folded the medical folder into plastic wrap and sealed it inside the lining of her travel bag. She pulled out a wrinkled newspaper from a nearby chair. The same one. The same photo. This time, she stared at it long and hard. The mud still showed on her dress. But in her eyes, something else. Defiance. She burned the paper over the kitchen stove, watched the flames curl the photo, warp the lies, blacken the ink until it vanished. When the fire died, she whispered to the silence, "They wrote the first chapter." She glanced at Nia, who kicked in her sleep. "Cairo will write the last." She stepped outside. The wind had changed direction. It carried something new. Smoke, dust, and the first smell of rain. But this time she wasn't afraid of it. This time she welcomed it, because mud may stain silk, but it also births seeds, and something had already taken root. The needle pierced through the fabric, a sharp glint in the lamplight, and came back up laced with a single strand of brown thread. Again and again and again, each movement was measured, rhythmic, almost like breathing. Zuri's fingers trembled slightly as she pulled the thread through. The cotton beneath her hands was soft and damp, with tears that had long since dried invisible. Around her, the room was quiet except for the distant hum of crickets and the gentle breathing of two children asleep in their shared crib. The night outside was thick with silence, broken only by the low whistle of wind brushing against the wooden shutters. The world had stopped talking about her, but the stain of her name had never washed away. She had become invisible, and somehow, in that invisibility, she began to live again. 5 years had passed. The old house in the hills had become something new. The walls, once flaking with age, were now lined with bright bolts of cloth. The floors were swept clean and smelled faintly of starch and lavender oil. The hum of sewing machines filled the air during the day, layered with laughter, gossip, and the clatter of spools rolling across wooden tables. On a cracked sign outside, painted by a child's hand, were the words, "Mud and Bloom." The women who came here were like her, castaways, survivors, broken glass turned to light. They worked with steady hands and quiet hearts, stitching their way back into the world. Zuri had taught them that. She had taught herself that even mud, when pressed by rain and patience, could yield something worth growing. Cairo sat near the window, a small boy with delicate features and eyes too old for his age. His chest rose and fell shallowly. The soft whistle of his breathing had become the rhythm of Zuri's days. Nia, his twin, sat beside him on the floor, sketching clumsy dresses with chalk on brown paper. Her laughter filled the gaps in Zuri's silence. Every now and then she'd hold up a drawing and shout, "Mama, look, this one's yours!" And Zuri would smile, nodding, her eyes glassy with something she never dared to name. Malik still came by every morning. He'd bring boxes of thread or food, sometimes stay to fix a sewing machine or paint a shelf. He never asked for anything in return. The women whispered that he loved her. Maybe he did. But Zuri had built her heart like her workshop walls, strong, quiet, with no doors left open. One afternoon, as the sun spilled through the half-broken windows, a tall man in a tailored suit arrived at the gate. His car was sleek, its tires too clean for the muddy path. The women stopped sewing. Even the air seemed to pause. He removed his sunglasses, looked around, and asked, "Is this where I can find Miss Zuri N'Dela?" Zuri came out wiping her hands on her apron. Her palms smelled of thread oil and starch. The man extended a card. "Quinton Mensa, founder, Q Mensa Foundation." "I've heard of you," he said. "Your work here, it's extraordinary." She blinked, uncertain. "We do what we can." He smiled faintly. "It's more than that. It's transformation. From what I gather, you help women others call ruined. You give them skill, dignity, and—" He glanced at the bright fabrics drying on the lines. Color. Zuri's voice stayed guarded. "What do you want, Mr. Mensa?" He handed her a brochure. It bore the words, "International Women's Summit, Renewal and Enterprise." Beneath it was the logo of Adebayo Holdings. Her breath caught. She looked up sharply. "Why would I—" "Because your story belongs there," he said quietly. "Because people need to see what you've built from the ground they tried to bury you in." She stared at him, pulse thrumming in her neck. "I'm not a showpiece." He nodded. "Neither am I. But sometimes, the only way to silence a lie is to stand in the same room as the people who told it and keep breathing." She turned away, pretending to check on a spool of thread, but her hands shook. Cairo coughed softly from the corner. Nia looked up from her drawings, eyes wide, sensing something important in the air. Zuri exhaled. "Who's sponsoring it?" Mr. Mensa hesitated, then said the name. The sound of Adebayo filled the room like smoke. Zuri froze. For years, she had avoided that name, refused to read it in papers, turned off radios when it was mentioned. But here it was again, polished and gleaming, tied to something that now had her name on it. Mensa watched her face carefully. You don't have to say yes now, just think about it. Sometimes justice doesn't need noise. It needs presence. He left the invitation on the table and walked away, his shoes leaving clean prints across her dusty floor. That night, long after the others had gone home, Zuri sat by the window. The moon hung low, pale as threadbare silk. The invitation lay open in her lap. Her thumb traced the embossed letters at the top. International Women's Summit. Beneath it, the list of speakers. Quinton Mensah, Amali Maseko, and the guest of honor, Kwame Adebayo. She laughed. Once, then again. The sound cracked in her throat. The children stirred. Nia mumbled in her sleep. Cairo coughed. She rose quietly, went to them, adjusted their blankets. She whispered, "He doesn't get to own my name anymore." The next morning, she found Malik outside tightening the truck's wheel bolts. The sky was just turning gold. She handed him the invitation. He read it silently. "You'll go," he said, not asking. Zuri crossed her arms. "He'll be there." Malik met her eyes. "Then it's time he sees what he threw away." Her jaw tightened. "You think I should parade my wounds on a stage?" "I think," he said, wiping grease from his hands, "that scars aren't meant to be hidden forever. They're meant to remind the world it didn't finish you." She looked away. The word finish stuck in her mind. That afternoon, she walked through the workshop slowly, touching every bolt of fabric. Brown, blue, gold. Her fingers paused on one, a deep shade of earthy umber flecked with gold thread. It reminded her of that night years ago when mud clung to her skin like accusation. Now it shimmered beneath her hand like forgiveness. She cut a piece, sewed. Her stitches were steady, intentional. Each pass of the needle felt like closing an old wound. She worked until dusk turned to dark. When she finally stepped back, there on the mannequin stood a dress unlike anything she had made before. Silk blended with coarse fabric, rich tones of soil and sunlight, a quiet rebellion woven in every seam. She named it Night Bloom. The next day, she packed the dress carefully into a box. Nia helped fold it, giggling, saying it looked like a sunset made of earth. Cairo smiled faintly from his chair, his fingers brushing the fabric as if blessing it. Zuri kissed their foreheads. "I'm not leaving forever," she told them. "Just for a few days." Malik stood by the truck, watching. "I'll take care of them." She nodded, eyes shining. "You already have." The city waited miles ahead, humming with life and danger. Luzira's skyline shimmered in the distance like a mirage. As the truck rolled down the hill, the wind carried the smell of rain again, but softer this time, like memory without pain. Zuri looked out the window. Fields blurred into roads, roads into glass towers. The hum of the city grew louder with every mile. She could almost hear her name whispering through it, not as scandal, but as rumor of resurrection. When they reached the hotel, her heart pounded. Cameras flashed near the entrance. Banners hung from marble pillars. Her logo, Mud and Bloom, was printed beneath the sponsors. She stared at it in disbelief. Her hands trembled around the fabric box. For the first time, she realized she wasn't walking into his world anymore. She was walking into hers. Inside, she found a quiet corner near the exhibition hall. Rows of mannequins stood dressed in silks, feathers, and diamonds. The air smelled of perfume and ambition. Her dress stood out, not because it was grand, but because it breathed, because it told a story without words. When Quinton Mensah saw her arrive, he smiled. "I was hoping you'd come." She didn't reply. Her eyes were fixed on the stage beyond the glass wall. A banner above it read, "Empowering Women Through Partnership," hosted by Adebayo Holdings. She felt the ground tilt beneath her, not with fear this time, but something heavier, anticipation, resolve. As she set her dress on display, one of the assistants whispered, "It's stunning. What do you call it?" Zuri looked at the fabric catching the light, mud and gold intertwined like past and future. "It's called Night Bloom," she said softly, "because beauty doesn't need sunlight to grow." From across the hall, a camera clicked, and for the first time in years, the flash didn't make her flinch. Outside, thunder murmured somewhere far away, faint as a memory. The storm was returning, but this time she was ready to meet it. She ran her fingers over the fabric once more and whispered to herself, not as a prayer, but as a promise. This time they'll remember the flower, not the mud. The lights dimmed, the crowd began to gather, and in that brief hush before the stage came alive, Zuri felt her pulse steady. The night that once tried to bury her was about to bear witness. The crowd shimmered like a mirage under the glass roof, all sequins and champagne light. Cameras clicked in bursts, flashes spilling over the runway as if lightning had been trapped inside the hall. Zuri stood backstage, her palms damp, her heartbeat caught between fear and something sharper, recognition. Across the sea of faces, mounted on a white marble plaque, hung a name she thought she'd buried, Kwame Adebayo, honorary chairman. For a moment, the world went silent. Her breath, her pulse, even the hum of lights above, all of it froze. Then came the surge of sound again, applause and chatter, and the slow roll of a familiar voice through the microphone. Welcome, everyone, to a night celebrating vision and progress. The voice that once promised her forever now echoed through the speakers, smooth as glass, polished as lies. Kwame stepped onto the stage in a tailored black tuxedo, his confidence rehearsed to perfection. The audience leaned in. He smiled that same smile the magazines loved, the smile that sold land, stocks, and dreams. Beside him, Amali Maseko glided forward, her silver gown cutting through the light like a blade. Cameras roared. Zuri felt her throat tighten. Her hands went instinctively to her dress, the one she had stitched by hand, mud-colored silk laced with gold. Night bloom. It hung on the mannequin under a single spotlight, so quiet, so steady, that even amid the luxury, it glowed like truth. A stage assistant whispered beside her, "You're up next, Miss N'Dela." After the speech, her mouth was dry. "He doesn't know I'm here?" The assistant smiled uncertainly. "He will soon." Kwame's voice filled the hall again. "We at Adebayo Holdings have always believed in empowering women, helping them rise above hardship, rebuild, and bloom." Each word struck like a stone skipping across water, smooth, shallow, leaving ripples behind. Zuri wanted to laugh. Instead, she exhaled through her nose, slow and measured, like someone about to dive under. Quentin Mensah appeared at her side, calm as ever. "Still sure you want to go through with this?" She nodded. More than ever. He adjusted his tie, glanced toward the crowd. Then let them see what they tried to bury. When the applause faded, the stage lights dimmed. The announcer's voice rang out. "And now, we welcome an artist whose work redefines transformation. A woman whose designs are stitched from courage itself, Ms. Zuri N'Dela, founder of Mud and Bloom." The name fell heavy and bright. Heads turned. Whispers rose. Kwame's smile faltered for the first time. Amali's fingers tensed on his arm. Zuri walked out. The floor beneath her heels gleamed like still water. She carried her dress folded over one arm, not hidden, not displayed, just held, as if it were a living thing. The audience leaned forward. Flashlights burst like tiny suns. She felt each flash sting her eyes but didn't look away. She placed the dress on the stand center stage, turned toward the crowd, and spoke. Her voice was low, textured by years of silence. "I made this from soil and silk, from everything people called dirty and everything they tried to polish. When mixed right, they shine together." A murmur rippled through the room. "This fabric is my memory," she said. "Every stitch, one night survived. Every shimmer, a promise kept." Then her gaze met Kwame's. He didn't blink. The stage lights caught the sharpness of his jaw, the tremor just beneath it. The hall seemed to shrink until there was nothing but the space between them, the man who cast her into rain and the woman who learned to walk through it. Amali's voice broke the silence, cool and clipped. "How poetic. But isn't art supposed to be original?" Zuri turned toward her. "So they say." Amali smiled thinly. "Funny. I've seen this color palette before. The earthy silk, the gold trim. It's almost identical to my solstice collection from last year. Some people call that coincidence. Others call it theft." The audience stirred. Zuri didn't flinch. "You think I copied you?" Amali shrugged. "If the fabric fits." The press buzzed. Photographers leaned closer. For a heartbeat, the air was tight with expectation. Then Zuri reached into her bag. Paper rustled. She held up a sealed folder. "This is my medical record," she said, voice steady. 5 years old, signed by Dr. Layla Tembo, the night I was found on Luzira's roadside, with twins. This," she lifted another page, "is the ambulance invoice, signed by Mr. Malik Okoro. And this," she turned, her eyes catching the light, "is my name, Zuri Adebayo, the one your chairman erased." The room gasped. Amale went pale. Kwame's jaw slackened. "I didn't come here to fight," Zuri said softly. "I came to finish." Her voice echoed. The crowd had gone silent. "I was buried under your stories, labeled a liar, a scandal, a stain. But mud, when pressed long enough, becomes clay. And clay," she brushed the hem of her dress, letting the fabric catch the light, "can be shaped into anything." A slow wave of applause began, hesitant, uncertain, then growing until it filled the hall. Quentin stood from his seat, clapping once, hard. Kwame looked at her, face pale beneath the lights. "Zuri," his voice barely formed the word. She turned away. Amali tried to speak, but the noise swallowed her. Reporters began to shout questions. "Is it true? Did she just expose Adebayo Holdings? Mr. Adebayo, care to respond?" Kwame didn't answer. He swayed slightly, then stepped back from the podium. Zuri picked up her dress, bowed her head to the audience, and left the stage. Backstage, she found a quiet corner and sank onto a crate. The sound of applause still echoed faintly, mingled with distant chaos. Microphones, cameras, and the click of hurried shoes. Quentin approached slowly. "You just lit the fuse." "I didn't mean to," she said, breathing hard. "I only told the truth." He smiled. "That's all it ever takes." Through the glass doors, she could see Kwame still standing on stage. Amale was whispering to him, her expression brittle, her hand tightening on his sleeve. But he wasn't listening. He looked lost, as though the walls of the empire he'd built had suddenly turned transparent. Zuri looked down at her hands. The skin trembled, but her heart didn't. For the first time in years, she felt air fill her lungs fully. She had walked into his world and left standing taller than it. Outside, rain began to fall against the glass roof, soft, rhythmic, forgiving. Somewhere deep inside her chest, she felt something loosen, something old and heavy drift away. But the peace didn't last. That night, as she returned to her hotel, her phone buzzed with messages. Dozens. Headlines were already spinning. Adebayo Empire under fire. Former wife confronts tycoon live on stage. The mud and bloom woman speaks truth to power. And beneath it all, a short text from an unknown number. "You don't know what you've started, AM." She stared at it for a long time. Her reflection in the window trembled with lightning outside. She locked the screen, placed the phone face down, and exhaled. In the silence, she could almost hear the echo of that night years ago. The tires, the splash, the scream swallowed by rain. But this time, she wasn't the one kneeling. She walked to the window, pressed her palm against the glass, and whispered to her reflection, "Let it rain." Down below, reporters crowded the hotel gates. Cameras flashed like fireflies, hungry for her reaction. Somewhere beyond them, the man who once called her worthless sat in his car, hands on the wheel, staring at nothing. He had built his empire on foundations of glass, and tonight the first crack had appeared. The storm outside thickened. Thunder rolled low like the rumble of truth waking from a long sleep. Zuri drew the curtain closed and turned off the light. Behind her, the dress she had made hung over a chair. The fabric shimmered softly in the dark, brown and gold like soil remembering sunlight. And she knew, tomorrow the world would be different. Not kinder, not easier, but hers. The air inside the auditorium trembled before the lights came on. The hum of cameras, the rustle of silk, the faint buzz of microphones waiting to wake. Zuri stood behind the curtain, one hand pressed to her chest, the other clutching the edge of the table where her designs were laid out. Her breath came shallow. It wasn't fear, It was memory clawing back from the dark. Cairo had been fine that morning. A soft laugh, a promise that he would stay in the audience with Malik. But an hour before her presentation, his breathing turned uneven. The sound had cut through the chatter like glass breaking. She had rushed to him, knelt, called his name. His lips had trembled, his fingers cold. Malik's voice had steadied her. He just needs the inhaler. Still, she had felt the old panic return, the helplessness of that night years ago, the rain, the mud, the sound of his small heart trying to hold on. Now she was here, her son in the care of the man who had once saved their lives, while she stood alone beneath the weight of her own resurrection. The stagehand signaled. She nodded once. The lights dimmed, and a low ripple of music filled the hall. The announcer's voice rose. Next, we present the visionary behind Mud and Bloom, Miss Zuri N'Dela. She stepped out. The light hit her all at once, warm, white, merciless. 1,000 eyes turned. The hall glittered with jewels and money, but for a fleeting second the world was silent. She felt the floor beneath her heels, the vibration of her own heartbeat echoing in the wooden boards. Then a voice pierced the quiet. "I think we've already seen her work," Amale Maseko said from the front row, lips curled in a smile that never reached her eyes. "I mean, isn't imitation the sincerest form of flattery?" The audience chuckled politely. Zuri didn't look at her. She moved to the center, unfolded the golden brown dress, Night Bloom, and placed it on the mannequin. The fabric shimmered like wet soil under sunlight. It didn't beg for attention. It claimed it. Her voice, when she finally spoke, carried the softness of something that had been broken and remade. "When I started Mud and Bloom, I had nothing. Not even a name people wanted to remember. I was told beauty couldn't grow from filth." She paused, eyes lifting toward the ceiling lights. "But I learned that mud doesn't ruin a seed. It protects it until it's strong enough to face the sun." For a moment, the hall was silent again. Cameras clicked. Amali stood. Her heels echoed against the marble floor. "Or maybe," she said sweetly, "it's easier to tell stories than to make art." The tension in the room shifted. Reporters leaned forward, ready to feed. Amali stepped closer to the stage. "You call that originality? My designs were displayed in Paris last spring with the same palette, the same textures. You can't just wash away your past and stitch it into something new." A murmur spread. Someone whispered, "Is she serious?" Another voice, "She's accusing her." Zuri kept her gaze steady. She reached into her portfolio bag, pulling out a small leather folder. Inside were the papers that had followed her since the night she almost died. The hospital form signed by Dr. Layla Tembo, the ambulance bill bearing Malik's name, the time-stamped documents that proved not her art, but her truth. She laid them on the table and looked straight at Amale. "You're right," she said softly. "I can't wash away my past. It's stitched into every fiber of what I make. But lies, those don't last when light hits them." The audience murmured again, louder this time. Kwame, seated beside Amale, shifted in his chair. His eyes darted toward the papers, confusion slicing through the mask he wore. Amale laughed, brittle, sharp. "What is this? Receipts?" "Evidence," said another voice. It came from Quentin Mensah. He stood from the judge's table, calm and deliberate. "I invited Ms. N'Dela here because her story is a mirror to what this industry pretends not to see. The dirt it buries under profit. These documents are proof that she wasn't just abandoned. She was erased." Cameras began flashing wildly. Reporters stood, murmuring into phones. Kwame rose slowly. "Enough," he said, voice strained. Zuri turned to face him. Their eyes met for the first time in years. "Do you remember the night it rained in Luzira?" she asked quietly. He froze. "You left me on the street. I begged you to listen, but you drove away. That mud you tried to drown me in," she gestured to her dress, "became this." The lights caught the sheen of the fabric as she spoke, making it glow like molten gold. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was fragile. the kind that came before a fall. Amali's voice wavered, but she forced a smile. She's rewriting history. You don't have to answer that, Kwame. But the cameras had already turned toward him. Kwame's lips parted. He tried to speak, but the words tangled in his throat. The image of her kneeling in the rain flashed in his mind, clearer than the stage before him. The lie he'd told the press, the forged headlines, the life built on denial, it all cracked at once. Zuri stepped closer to the microphone. I don't need your apology, she said softly. I only need the truth to breathe. The spotlight followed her as she lifted the edge of the dress, showing the streaks of brown silk beneath the gold. This, she said, is what forgiveness looks like when it learns to stand. A single clap broke the stillness. Then another. Then the room erupted. The sound wasn't polite. It was raw, human. People rose from their seats. The flash of cameras became a storm of light. Amali turned, face pale, and whispered something to an assistant. Kwame sat back down, head in his hands. Backstage, Zuri collapsed onto a chair, hands shaking. The adrenaline drained from her body, leaving only silence. Her phone buzzed. A message from Malik. Cairo's okay, breathing steady now. He's asking for you. She exhaled. Tears she hadn't realized she was holding falling freely. The sound of the audience still thundered beyond the curtain, but she only heard that one message in her head. Then Quentin appeared beside her. He held out a tablet. The story's already breaking. Zuri N'Dela confronts Adebayo dynasty. It's everywhere. Zuri didn't look. She just nodded. I didn't mean for this to become a war. Sometimes, Quentin said, peace begins with truth that hurts first. The lights flickered. In the distance, thunder rumbled, soft and slow, like the echo of applause from the sky itself. She walked out the back door into the humid night air. The rain had started again, thin at first, then heavier. Drops streaked her face like ash turned clean. She didn't run. She let it fall. Across the street, a massive billboard showed Kwame's smiling face beside the words, Adebayo Holdings, building Africa's future. The irony twisted inside her. The wind lifted the hem of her dress, sending a shimmer of gold and brown through the darkness. The reflection in the puddle at her feet shimmered too, one half bright, one half shadow. Behind her, sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Press cars, maybe police, maybe just noise. But the sound didn't shake her. She had learned to walk through storms without losing her ground. In her hotel room later that night, the city lights flickered against the window. Her children slept in the next room. Malik sat quietly by the door, keeping watch. She poured herself a cup of tea, her hands still trembling, and stared at the cityscape beyond the glass. The world was spinning around her name again, but this time she wasn't running from it. She reached for her sketchbook, opened a fresh page, and began to draw. Lines curved into shapes, shapes into symbols. Two hands cupping a seed. Beneath it, she wrote one word, bloom. The tea had gone cold when the phone rang again. Unknown number, she answered anyway. A man's voice, hoarse, distant. Zuri. She didn't speak. I need to see you, he said. It was Kwame. Her silence stretched across the line like a blade. He exhaled, a sound that carried defeat. Not for me, for you, for the truth. Zuri closed her eyes. The rain outside softened to a hush, as if the world were holding its breath. I'll decide if there's anything left to say, she whispered, and ended the call. She looked at the sketch on the page again, the seed glowing faintly under the lamp's light. Outside, thunder rolled once more. The city slept, and somewhere between the storm and the silence, the past was beginning to break. The rain had stopped, but the city hadn't slept. Under the dull orange glow of street lamps, a convoy of black sedans crawled toward the Adebayo Tower like a funeral procession. Reporters swarmed outside the gates, their umbrellas blooming like dark flowers. Camera flashes painted the night in bursts of white. Headlines screamed across digital billboards above the avenue. Adebayo Empire under investigation. Investors flee amid scandal. Inside the glass tower, silence sat heavy. Kwame Adebayo stood at the center of his office, watching the rain trace streaks down the floor-to-ceiling windows. He had once ruled this skyline. Every light outside had felt like his, but now the city looked like it was watching him die in slow motion. His reflection in the glass seemed older than the man he remembered. Eyes hollow, tie loosened, the perfect polish of his life cracking 1 inch at a time. Behind him, Amali paced. Her heels clicked like metronomes counting down his ruin. "You need to call the board," she hissed. "Do damage control, issue a statement, anything." He didn't turn around. "The statement won't matter if the numbers don't. You think silence will save you?" He looked at her finally. "It's all I have left." Amali stopped pacing, her lips curled into a bitter smile. "You think this is my fault?" He didn't answer, but his silence said enough. She laughed softly. "You were already falling long before I arrived. I just made sure someone was watching." Her words landed like stones in a shallow pond. No echo, just ripples of something inevitable. She picked up her clutch from the table. "You're finished, Kwame. The investors pulled out. The foundation froze your accounts. You're on your own now." When she reached the door, he said her name, voice low. "Why?" She turned, one hand on the handle. "Because power attracts rot. You made me believe I could shine beside you, but you only wanted a mirror. Now it's cracked. Enjoy your reflection." The door closed behind her, soft as a sigh. Kwame sank into his chair. The hum of the city seeped through the glass. Traffic, sirens, the chaos he had built. On his desk lay a single invitation from the summit that had destroyed him. The ink smudged where rain had touched it. His fingers trembled as he picked it up. Beneath the logo, her name was printed clearly. Zuri N'Dela, founder of Mud and Bloom. He whispered it once, like a prayer he didn't deserve. A knock broke the quiet. "Come in," he said. It was his assistant, pale, nervous. "Sir, they're here, the auditors and the press. Kwame raised a hand. "Clear the floor. No one gets in without my word." The assistant hesitated, then left quickly. Kwame stood again, walked to the window. From this height, the city below looked small enough to crush. He thought of all the deals signed, the nights spent charming donors, the speeches about rebuilding Africa's heart while he emptied its pockets. He saw now what he hadn't then, that every empire made of glass eventually reflects its maker's sins. He took a deep breath and picked up his coat. Hours later, the truck stopped outside the Mud and Bloom workshop. The lights inside still burned, though it was past midnight. Through the window, Zuri sat with her children asleep on either side of her, their faces soft in the flickering glow of the sewing lamp. She was mending something, a child's torn sleeve. The rhythm of her hands was steady, patient. Kwame stood in the rain, unsure how to move. Every drop felt like a punishment he had earned. He wiped his face, but it didn't matter. The wetness was both water and guilt. When she looked up and saw him through the glass, she didn't flinch. She set the fabric down, pressed a hand to Nia's back, then stood and walked to the door. He didn't expect her to open it, but she did. Her voice was calm, almost detached. "What are you doing here?" He hesitated. The words wouldn't come. Then, quietly, "I came to tell the truth." She folded her arms. 5 years too late." He nodded once. "Maybe, but the lies have started to rot and I can't breathe through them anymore." The sound of rain filled the silence between them. Behind her, the faint hum of the sewing machine seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. He took something from his coat pocket, a small, crumpled envelope. "I don't expect forgiveness. I only want you to see this." She didn't take it. He laid it on the table beside the door. The envelope was soft with moisture, the ink slightly blurred. "It's my statement," he said, "signed for the investigators. Everything. How Amali manipulated the accounts, how she blackmailed me, how the foundation was a shell. They'll have the documents by morning. I wanted you to hear it from me first." Zuri's expression didn't change. "You think this will fix what you did?" "No," he said simply. "It's not for fixing, it's for ending." He looked around the room, the walls painted with children's drawings, shelves lined with folded fabric, the smell of soap and thread filling the air. "You built something from nothing. I spent everything to build nothing." He sat on the edge of a chair, his shoulders heavy. I thought control meant safety, that love was weakness, that if I gave you anything real, you'd see what I was, small. I made myself a god in my own story, and gods don't bleed. But I did, and I made you bleed too. Zuri's jaw tightened. You didn't make me bleed. You made me bloom. He looked up. Her eyes were steady. There was no hatred left, only distance like a river too wide to cross. I can't undo it, he said. No, she agreed, but you can stop writing your lies over mine. For the first time, he smiled, a faint, broken thing. You always had the last word. A child's cough interrupted them. Cairo stirred in his sleep, breathing unevenly. Zuri moved to his side, adjusting the blanket. Kwame watched her hands, gentle, precise, full of grace he could never imitate. I didn't come to ask for anything, he said quietly, only to speak it before the world does. They'll take everything tomorrow. I'll lose the tower, the accounts, the name. But maybe the truth will breathe again once it's out. Zuri looked at him, her face unreadable. The truth doesn't need you to speak it. It just needed time to find its own voice. He nodded, stood, and looked around one last time. If I had known mud could turn to beauty, I would have knelt beside you that night instead of driving away. She turned toward the window, the rain now soft as mist. You can't change where the story began, but you can choose where it ends. He hesitated at the door. You'll be fine, he said, more to himself than to her. I already am, she replied. When he left, she didn't watch him go. She went back to her chair, lifted the torn sleeve, and began to stitch again. Her hands didn't shake. Outside, Kwame walked into the rain. For the first time, he didn't try to outrun it. The streetlights reflected off the puddles like fragments of gold. His shoes soaked through, but he kept walking. The silence of the city wrapped around him, dense, heavy, final. By morning, the news would spread. The empire would collapse. Amale would sell her shares and flee. The Adebayo name would sink from headlines to history. But none of that mattered now. What mattered was the sound of his own footsteps against wet concrete, the sound of a man learning what loss really means. At dawn, Zuri opened the envelope he'd left behind. Inside were typed pages, his confession, signatures, the bank records he'd hidden. And at the bottom, in uneven handwriting, a single sentence. I wanted to say your name one last time without shame. She read it twice, then folded the letter and placed it in the box with her children's birth records and the old ambulance bill. The papers no longer felt heavy. When Nia woke, rubbing her eyes, she asked, Mama, will it rain again today? Zuri smiled faintly. Maybe, but we're not afraid of rain anymore, are we? Nia shook her head, grinning. Zuri brushed the girl's hair back. That's my brave one. She turned to the window. The sky outside was clearing, streaks of pale gold cutting through the gray. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled its last breath, like a curtain falling after a long play. Zuri picked up a new piece of fabric, darker than the last, threaded her needle, and began a new design. The first stitch glimmered in the morning light, but her hands paused halfway. Through the quiet came a faint knock on the door. She frowned, set the needle down, and opened it. On the porch lay a small brown envelope sealed no name. Inside, a single key. Old, tarnished, familiar. It was from Kwame's office. The inscription on the tag read simply, "For the record." She stared at it for a long moment, the sound of the needle still echoing in her mind. The key gleamed under the dawn light, and deep inside her chest, something unspoken stirred. Pity, relief, and the faint ache of forgiveness still waiting to bloom. The question arrived before the sun did. A small voice at the edge of sleep, cutting through the hush like a bell. If mud is dirty, how do flowers live there? Nia stood in the doorway wearing an oversized workshop tee, hair a tangle, eyes bright the way children's eyes are at dawn. She held a ribbon between her fingers, the new one, heavy with its bronze leaf and engraved letters, Humanitarian Design Award. It dangled and flashed as the first light slid over the hills, spilling across bolts of fabric, spindles of thread, scissors sleeping like silver birds. Zuri smiled without turning. She was at the long table, shoulders bent, needle flashing. She paused only to wet the thread so it would pass cleanly. "Because flowers don't think mud is dirty," she said. "They think it's home." Her voice softened. "Come here." Nia crossed the room and climbed onto the tall stool beside her mother. The girl smelled like soap and morning. She touched the dress spread on the table, a fold-down cape of dusk blue, the hem embroidered with small gold specks like stars that had fallen into earth. "Is this for the new collection?" she whispered. "For ours," Zuri said, "for the women who taught their hands to speak." The workshop had changed. It was no longer the patched house in the hills with one humming machine and a dream that fit inside a bread tin. It breathed now, wide and light, windows cracked open to the smell of wet clay and wood smoke, a garden out back where offcuts became quilts and old stories became patterns. Workers moved through the aisles with mugs of tea and easy jokes, the low chorus of machines like a river. A framed newspaper hung by the entrance. The photo showed women laughing beneath a banner. Mud and Bloom expands job training across district. Below it, another frame. Zuri N'Dela honored for social impact. She had accepted the award without fanfare, eyes lowered, hands steady on the podium. After the applause, she returned straight to the line to fix a broken presser foot. The ribbon had ended up in Naya's hands because the child kept flitting around the house like a sunbeam, and sunbeams are the best places to hang a medal. The day began. Steam rose from irons. Chalk marked curves and seams. Malik arrived with a ledger under his arm and a smile he couldn't hide, 1,000 small problems ready to bend in his hands. He wore a shirt with rolled sleeves. He'd been teased for it at first, the boardroom mechanic. But no one laughed now. The women called him Baba Thread because he moved through the place like a second heartbeat, fixing belts, balancing books, setting schedules with the patience of a man who knows a storm when he smells one and a harvest when he sees it. He sat at the desk beside the window, ran a thumb down a column of numbers and said, "We can hire 4 more next month, if cloth prices hold." Zuri nodded. "Do it." She looked at him properly then, the quiet gratitude that had grown roots in her chest. "And order heavier needles for the denim. The last batch broke. Already on it." He hesitated. "The press wants another interview. They want photos of you in the new studio, with the award, with the—" He trailed off, eyes flicking to the framed headlines. He didn't say with the scandal behind you because he didn't have to. "Tell them to photograph the hands," Zuri said. "Not the face." He smiled. "Boss's orders." By noon, the room smelled like starch and warm fabric, and laughter had braided itself around the whir of machines. Cairo sat beside the back window with his sketch pad, legs tucked beneath him, a plum in one hand and a pencil in the other. He drew slowly, line by careful line, a shoulder seam, a sleeve, a pocket with a secret stitched inside. He breathed evenly now. The doctors had taught him tricks for stubborn lungs, how to count under his breath, how to sit so air could find its way. Even so, he kept an inhaler in his pocket the way other boys kept marbles. Zuri glanced at him over her shoulder every few minutes. The look was instinct, not fear. He felt it and flashed her a small grin that made her feel young and old at once. In the afternoon, Quentin Mensah stopped by with a box of labels and a stack of contracts. He smelled faintly of cedar and good coffee. He made his jokes about retiring to a hammock, then sat with Malik to sign paperwork. He left quickly. He always did. Like a man who'd learned long ago to never overstay his role in the stories of people he admired. Before going, he set a single card on Zuri's table. Mentorship Cohort. Mud and Bloom to lead. She traced the letters with her thumb and nodded. He didn't need thanks. The new building had a small glass case near the door that held objects no one else would display. A rusty thimble, a bent needle, a torn sleeve mended in a child's uneven stitches, the ambulance invoice, edges soft from handling. and the hospital wristband, its printed letters faded to ghost gray, the loop unfastened and kept that way. Visitors paused here, often without knowing why, like people who find themselves whispering in chapels. Zuri passed it as she moved from station to station, checking hems, blessing seams with a thumb pressed flat. The case reminded her that rescue had not been sparkles and speeches, but cold tile and a stranger's truck and the smell of rain. Late light landed on everything. It glazed the long table. It caught in Nia's hair and turned it to honey. It made the metals look smaller. Zuri stepped outside into the garden to breathe. The earth smelled clean, damp from yesterday's storm. She crouched to touch a sprig of basil, pressed it to her nose, and smiled. "You're dramatic," she said to the plant, "just like my girl." When she stood, a motorbike turned off the road and coasted to the gate. The rider wore a courier's vest. He lifted his visor. "Delivery for Ms. N'Dela." His voice held the neutrality of someone used to keeping secrets. He handed her a small wooden box wrapped in brown paper and twine. There was weight to it, the quiet kind. No sender's name, only a short note beneath the string. "Use the key." She didn't need to ask which one. The tarnished key from yesterday lay in the shallow dish by the door, next to chalk and bobbins, a stray visitor among domestic things. She had turned it over in her palm last night, read the tag again, for the record, felt the chill of what it meant, and set it down without opening whatever it wanted to open. Now the box seemed to hum in her hands, like a voice pressed against a door. She carried it inside. The room shifted around her, sound bending away as if senses understood before mine did. Malik watched her cross the floor and straightened in his chair, worry flickering across his face. Nia touched the metal at her neck. Cairo put down his pencil, eyes alert and steady. Zuri set the box on the table. She lifted the key from the dish. The metal was warm from sunlight. It didn't fit any drawer in this house. It fit this lock like it had been waiting. One twist, a soft click. The lid sprang. Inside lay a flash drive. Plain, black, no logo. Beside it, a letter, folded twice. The paper was heavy, the way expensive cards are heavy. The handwriting inside leaned forward, urgent. "Zuri," it read. "They will find this anyway. I am sending it to you first. I want you to decide, because I have forfeited the right. This is the dash cam from that night in Luzira. It sees what I refuse to see. I do not ask for forgiveness. I ask for a final mercy, that the truth, in the end, pass through your hands. Whatever you choose will be the right thing. K." She closed her eyes. The letters still burned behind them. A sound rose in her chest and didn't become a sob, because some sounds have learned not to cry in public. Malik stood. "You don't have to." "I know," she said. He said nothing more. He went to the front door and slid the bolt, then drew the shade, the way you do when weather changes quickly. The hum of the room dulled. Even the machines seemed to wait. Zuri carried the box to the small office in back where inventory was kept, where the desk was nicked along the edge from years of use. She sat. She placed the flash drive on the wood. She could smell cedar from the box. She could smell her own skin, thread oil, flour from lunch, basil, the faint trace of iron that never leaves you after labor. She could also smell rain that wasn't there, which is the mind telling the body to brace itself. She plugged the drive into the old laptop. The screen lit her face in blue. The video opened to darkness, then grain, then sound, the hiss of water against glass, the high whistle of wipers, the low purr of a car that liked itself. The dashcam's field of view held the road like a throat. Headlights carved two pale tunnels through a storm. The date stamp glowed in the corner. Digits she knew even without reading. She watched the hood of a luxury sedan cut a clean line through puddles, watched warning lights blink across a gate she had once called home. She listened to a voice, not hers, soft, velvet, amused, a mahali, a laugh like glass. She'll learn. They all do. And then the voice she had lived with and forgotten how to hear. "Drive," Kwame said. No thunder, just the word. The car surged. The dashcam did not blink when the spray rose. It did not look away when a figure stumbled on the sidewalk, the white of her dress a strip of surrender in the dark. The camera held the moment that had burned the memory of rain into Zuri's bones. It recorded the way she turned her body to shield her belly, the way one hand reached without being answered. It recorded the instant the wheels carved a wave and threw it. It recorded her fall. Zuri watched the woman on the screen fall and did not gasp, because you cannot gasp at your own ghost. The video cut forward when the car turned the corner, but the dash cam kept recording as the taillights faded and something else arrived. A dented truck sliding into frame, brakes squealing, hazard lights breathing red. A man rushed into view. He skidded, caught himself, fell to his knees in the mud as if in prayer, lifted as someone who had stopped being a wife and started being a mother, gathered the world into his arms without ceremony, and ran. The laptop fan whined. She hadn't noticed she was gripping the edge of the desk until her knuckles ached. Her breathing had grown shallow, matching the old rhythm of that night. She paused the video on a frame that didn't move, her head turned back toward the camera, hair pasted to her cheek. In the same frame, somewhere small and obvious, a tiny limb pushed beneath skin. Cairo, a foot pressing against a world not yet with him. She shut the laptop. Her hands lay flat on either side of it for a long time. In the next room, she could hear Nia asking for water. She could hear Malik answering softly. She could hear a stitch breaking under a needle and the small curse of a woman who would re-thread it without complaint. The life she had fought for was not quiet now. It was busy. It was good. She opened the letter again and read the lines a second time. I do not ask for forgiveness. I ask for a final mercy. She stood. She took the flash drive and the letter back to the main room. Everyone fell silent as if music had stopped. She didn't speak. She went to the kiln used for clay buttons and die setting and placed the drive on its metal lip. The kiln's belly glowed faint as an ember. She could feel the warmth on her face. She slid the letter beneath the grate. Flames licked the edge of the paper with the slow greed of things that eat meaning before ash. Malik's eyes searched hers. Are you sure? She nodded. Her voice came low and clean, the way water sounds when it passes over rock. Some truths save you. Some only keep you sick. I'm done being sick. The plastic softened. It curled like a leaf in summer heat, then caved into itself, the circuitry cracking with tiny sounds like dry bark breaking. The letter darkened, sentences twisting into smoke. The smoke rose and the room smelled briefly of plastic and ink and the sour sweetness of paper dying. Zuri didn't flinch. She watched until the fire had nothing left to hold. There is no justice in humiliating the broken, she said quietly. There is only mercy in refusing to break the living. Her words spread through the room without asking permission to be remembered. The women did not clap. They didn't need to. Something heavier passed between them, an understanding, an oath, the kind of permission that doesn't require a stamp. Nia slipped her hand into her mother's. Does that mean the flower wins? She asked. Zuri squeezed. It means the flower doesn't kill the dirt to bloom. The afternoon sloped toward evening. They opened the doors and let the cool air walk in. The garden moved as if a giant had breathed on it. The basil leaned. The marigolds tipped their faces. The soil held its scents, the way old hands hold names they won't forget. News came, as it always did, late and breathless. The foundation announced new leadership. The board dissolved. Amale vanished from the gossip shows, leaving behind a trail of sweetness that smelled like old fruit. Reporters called. Zuri's phone lit with numbers she didn't recognize. She let it hum on the table until the battery gave up. No one inside the workshop looked at the screen when it went dark. They looked at fabric instead, because fabric is a language that never lies. Evening found them in the yard, chairs pulled into a crooked circle, bowls of stew balanced on knees. Cairo sat on the step, inhaler in his pocket like a secret he no longer feared. He drew again in the last light. this time 2 hands cupping something too small to name. He held the paper up. "Mama," he said, "is this right?" She looked. She saw the cupped hands. She saw, floating above them, the smallest stitch drawn like a star. "It's perfect," she said, and meant it. Night arrived without thunder. It came soft with the rustle of leaves and the far-off laughter of children who do not yet know what must be survived. Malik washed dishes at the outdoor sink, sleeves wet, humming tunelessly. The women folded the day onto shelves. The workshop windows glowed warm and square. The glass case by the door breathed out a reflection: thimble, needle, torn sleeve, wristband, objects that looked back at themselves without shame. At the threshold, Zuri paused. She lifted the shallow dish and placed the key inside it again. The metal looked smaller. It had chosen not to open a wider wound. She understood the gift and the cost. Mercy is always expensive. It just doesn't send you receipts. Nia tugged her sleeve. "Will it rain tomorrow?" "Maybe," Zuri said. "We have umbrellas." "And seeds," Cairo added, surprising himself. He said it like boys say brave things in their sleep. Zuri laughed softly, the sound like a river finally widening. "Yes," she said, "and seeds." They closed up. The night took back its insects and left them only the steady beat of their own hearts. Before turning off the last lamp, Zuri stood by the dress on the mannequin and touched the hem, a place where mud and gold met without fighting. The fabric held the memory of her fingers the way soil remembers rain. When she blew out the light, the dark did not feel like an old enemy anymore. It felt like a field with room for new names. Ash still swirled in the kiln. It rose in a lazy spiral, weightless, and slipped through the narrow gap at the window, drifting into the garden. It settled on the soil without a sound. The first breath of night wind ruffled it, folded it into earth, fed it back to what would come. Somewhere beyond the hills, far from the eyes that once watched for her to fall, a flower opened, and no one saw it. That was fine. It had never grown for applause. And in the quiet after mercy, a question lingered. Not heavy, not cruel, just human. When proof and peace ask to share your hands, which one do you keep? Zuri stood in the doorway with both children touching her hips and felt the answer move through her like breath. She chose, not with a speech, not with a law, but with a life. The night made room. The mud did what it always does when no one scolds it for being itself. It turned to soil, and the soil did the only work it has ever cared to finish. It bloomed. There are stories that begin in silence, born from the weight of rain and the ache of survival. But somewhere between loss and forgiveness, life always finds a way to bloom. Every wound, every fall, every act of cruelty becomes a seed the earth remembers how to hold. When time passes and mercy chooses to stay, those seeds become something more than pain. They become proof that beauty can rise from the places we once tried to bury. In the end, it isn't power or wealth that defines a legacy. It's the quiet moments of grace, the hand that lifts instead of strikes, the heart that forgives instead of hardens, the courage to tell the truth even when no one applauds. Because light, when it finally finds us, doesn't erase the darkness. It simply teaches us how to live with it. There will always be storms, and there will always be mud. But maybe that's what the world needs, a reminder that flowers do not bloom on marble floors. They bloom where the earth has been broken open. They bloom where tears have fallen. They bloom where someone once believed it was impossible. And so, to everyone listening, remember this. Your story, no matter how heavy, is not over as long as you still choose to grow. Kindness is never wasted. Truth is never lost. And even the smallest act of compassion can echo far beyond what the eyes can see. Thank you for walking through this journey, for feeling, for listening. If this story touched your heart, let it live on through your thoughts. Share what it meant to you in the comments. Your words might be the light someone else is waiting for. Don't forget to follow, to stay close, because there will always be another story waiting to bloom, another truth rising quietly from the mud.